Since I'm getting into the spiritual side of things, I was thinking about when I was young, um, going to the graveyard with my godmother. It was something that she did on a regular basis. I remember we made a lot of trips to the graveyard. I remember her, not sure if it was a jar or a can, but I remember her getting graveyard dirt and different things back then. And, we visited a lot of her relatives' graves. And this was something she would go and, regularly, put flowers. And you don't really see people as dedicated now as you did back then to honoring their ancestors and their family members. But I remember that was something that she did a lot. That's one thing. That's the one thing that sticks in my mind is her going to that graveyard, going to the graveyard. That was something she did religiously. Um, I remember a couple of times going at night, and I remember every time almost going during the daytime. But that was something that she always did. And in me thinking about this, and since me getting more into the spiritual aspects of things, there are a lot of people that do, and as far as men, it's not just women that do certain things and certain workings, but men do as well. Even though back years ago it was more common, more known. But I think it's starting to get kind of people are becoming more aware now that there's a lot of men out here that are doing a lot of things too. A lot of spiritual men. No matter what spiritual path a person is on, there are a lot of spiritual men with spiritual mindsets. One of the things I was going to point out is that when people are trying to do graveyard work now, trying to get dirt from your ancestors, um, I remember when I moved one time. I remember my godfather actually told me. He said, just make sure when you go, take you some dirt in a jar. I remember him saying that. Didn't do it, but I was young, so naturally I didn't do it. But the point I'm making is that now you have people going to graveyards and cemeteries, and probably more so cemeteries than graveyards, because usually a graveyard is something that's connected to a church or something. And I don't think it's as common there, but in cemeteries it's extremely common. So people that are going to cemeteries trying to do different work, you need to understand something about the way cemeteries operate. Once a body has been in the ground for a certain period of time, they lower the body down lower and they place another body on top of it. So when you look at your headstones or your headstone markers, those are more so memorials than actual place markers of where your ancestors buried. That's why you see those headstones so close together, because you may have 20 people there, 10, 15, who knows. So when you think that you're going to a particular grave site of your particular ancestor, thinking that you're working only with your ancestor, the first person on top may not even be your ancestor. It could be somebody else's. So, if that's something that you are looking to do as far as going to a graveyard or working with graveyard dirt from your ancestors, you may do better going to a church, because I think it's a little bit less likely that that'll be the case there. But if it's a cemetery, you almost guaranteed, unless they were the last ones buried, and then but even in that spot, you've had several people buried in that exact same spot, so it's not just yours. So unless it's like an old former slave cemetery or something of that nature, and even then, sometimes if it has a headstone, there's probably a good chance that only the body of that particular person is buried there. But if it doesn't, even back then, there were times they would just take a bunch of bodies and throw them in a hole, and they may not have a name. But if you have a headstone with the name on it, chances are, especially if it's old and maybe the grass has grown, it's no longer being kept up, then that's probably the only person buried in that spot. But it's just something that, I think that if men are going to be doing that kind of work, that is something that you need to be mindful of and understand that you're not just dealing with your ancestors when you go to a cemetery. I don't care what name is on that particular headstone. The person next to them, and maybe there could be a few headstones a little further down, but it's a lot of people in that particular area right there, not just yours. So, for me personally, if I'm gonna deal with anybody, it's gonna be my own people. I'm not messing with, I know some people don't say, well, you go and get to know another. And I understand all that, but that's just not something that I would be comfortable with. My thing is my folks, my people, and that's who I connect with. That's who I deal with. That's where my connection is. So if it's not mine, you can have it. If it's not my people, I know a lot of people back in the day, there were certain people that they admire, or maybe certain people that you know of, and you may go and say, I know this is a famous person that may be a civil rights leader or whatever. Unless you come from my bloodline, I'm okay. So that's my whole point. So, but regardless of how you do it, just understand what you're getting into and the way cemeteries are set up. Because a lot of times you got people doing stuff and they're not aware that you have multiple people in one area. So when you go and talk about you getting graveyard dirt from your great Aunt Sally, you could be getting somebody else's Uncle Sam's dirt. So just understand and be aware of the way cemeteries actually work. Like I said, I'm not positive, but I think graveyards attached to churches are a little bit different. Because I think they make room to bury more people, because people usually, when it's a church, they only bury their own there. They don't allow a lot of outsiders. So there's not as much need to make room. They usually have the room already there. But when you're dealing with a public cemetery, they're just stacking bodies. So just understand what you're getting into and understand what you're dealing with. Well, that's all I got to say. Just had it in my mind. I thought I would share it. I'm out.